We are controlling transmission.
All of the great ones, whatever it was, Scientology and prophecies that were made didn't take place. Now what? Put it this way. I say to you, and to you all universally, don't get lost into a dogma of what will happen tomorrow and it doesn't take place. Many, and I say we have to be very careful with that, creative people and beings out there predicted what will happen. We have to be very careful with prophecies because I believe we don't have the psychic or the intuitive capacity, if you will, to predict, because we forgot to observe over time what can unfold and will take place and can happen. So what we could do is to have a probability. Computers would use algorithms, and the more data, of course, the more accurate your prediction would be. The better your observation, the better your prediction would be. But you can't fix that on a day or a time or a place, because things unfold naturally by the choices of the collective. And that is what we are connecting with. So I'd say, yeah, debunk yourself. I see people now dismantling their own character, their own self, from the books that they read. But there's something past the books, and I will give you a little story here. And this is what I follow when it goes back to, which is what I believe America has the opportunity to learn again from all your ancestors were immigrants not coming from this continent. And they lost tradition and roots over time. Second, third generations, you don't even know what is an etiquette anymore. How to behave, what to do, what not to do. So it went wild, wild west here, out of control, killing back and forth, a lot of craziness that karmically we have to recover from. So I say etiquette or working together is there's certain things that you don't do. There's certain things that you keep with you and certain things that others keep with themselves. So one example is I learned from my grandma, and this is when you want to leave all the psychic and the intuitive and everything from upstairs and bring it back to the human body, to you, man. Hue manifest in the body. Know this, the body is the typewriter, but it's not the author. The radio is not the radio station nor the speaker at the radio station. So you can, when the radio is dismantled and it no longer works, things are still being transmitted, whether people believe it or not. So there is an outside, there's an inside, there's an above, there's an below, and a beyond, and a sideways. There are also many dimensions that exist. But here's a story about the skeptic or the critic. In my opinion, if you watch a farmer and he's harvesting his strawberries, he uses this machine to create this miracle water, and his strawberries are kind of like this size. A critic comes along, this can't be good, this is all not right. And you have no scientific backing, all of this, but yet the product is there. It leaves a physical imprint in this reality. Call it 3D, it's part of the equation. You can't go around it. And I hear the critics say this and this and everything that's wrong with what's being done there. But I do not see the critic creating his or her own garden and bringing strawberries of this size and, I don't know, fruit sugar increased by 400% and super healthy. I don't see that happening. So as long as a critic cannot reproduce anything he criticizes and show it that he can do it better, you have no right to criticize. Nor are you equipped with the equivalent of the knowledge to go further within that construct. To some people that sounds like, oh, well, the fancy words that you use that I don't use. Well, expand your vocabulary. People think that I was just a a rapper. I financed my rap career with being a technical engineer in VCR, computer and satellite and systems analysis engineering. So German education. And then I went to the US and learned audio engineering, journalism, and broadcast, how this even works. I worked as a voiceover person for international commercials, learning how to formulate speech, how to speak accurately, not mumble, and deliver the message clearly. So my rap career was financed by my education. My passion is and always will be metaphysics, which you hear in my lyrics. I was always preaching metaphysics till that took over, and rap went that commercial that I was like, I kind of lost the passion there, because everybody's looking for sales and a quick buck, and you have to sell your soul in order to be a star on stage, and I kind of lost interest. So you can say I went underground. I'm working on a creative aspect to bring that fun back, because my aim is not money or lamestream or to be appealing to quackademics. I do what I am having fun with, and if anybody want to criticize that, I have a little story for that. And I think that's where we can learn and get together and learn all from one another. There's a baker in town. It's like a farmer story. And he bakes the bread. And he makes the little sweet stuff and the cheesecakes and the Danish rolls and the cookies. And the town loves the guy. And there's a guy next door who hates that guy. He never goes into the bakery, complains about how everything is wrong. He uses the wrong flour, the recipes are stolen, and he's not original, and hates the guy. The critic, mind you, usually is not successful, doesn't have a group of people, not a big following, and is usually the one who had followed something and fell because he followed his own delusion. And then he would say, you're delusional, which is pretty interesting. So the suffering is in the people not having success. Interestingly also, when the critic has the satisfaction and makes the money and is rich and has all the moolah and all the this here. I've seen it for years. You won't hear anything. Nothing would pop up or show anywhere or show up anywhere in social media, because there's nothing there. They're satisfied. They have their little TV. They got their car. I don't know, motorcycle, whatever you got, whatever you bought it for, wherever you got that from, and they're happy. And they're not blessed. It's leaving them. It's not staying with them. They're not creating sustainability. And it's breaking down, and they get angry, and they are very vexed. Why should others have success and I'm not having success, and I'm trying so hard? Well, for those who are going that route, learn to be kind to one another. Zen Buddhism teaches don't engage. All of those, I see people online with Zen quotes and whatnot, and why are you still engaging when you're quoting that? What says actually undoing, sitting and not reacting, not provoking, not saying anything, not responding, feeling. Sit with the feeling. Sit with it and process it. Don't pin anything on anybody, and then build your garden. So with the baker, you see that this hating from the sideline and not producing better produce. Nothing is about nothing. If I don't eat at the Thai restaurant, why would I hate on the kitchen or the cook or how they would do the recipe or how they would even establish a restaurant? If I'd be busy going to the groceries, complaining about each and every product, which I would believe it's fraudulent or it's not real, or the grams are incorrect, or the nutritional facts are not right, or this is GMO and this and that, I lose my mind. I say people live and let live. I do not believe in weaponry. See, in Germany, if you own a gun, you go to jail directly. If you're not a cop or a person of authority that has a psychological evaluation to carry that, I think that's needed. And it's also said by German psychology, C.G. Jung, which I also on the side studied at like night college. You don't get degrees there. You pay for it and then you educate yourself. So I learned computer language. Look, I have several degrees and things and diplomas, which I don't have to throw up. Not throw up, as in put the plaques behind me to say, oh, I'm this, I'm that. I could have gone to Yale or Harvard or whatever, because I could have furthered my education, which I did in, finding patterns, in looking at things that would make sense. As in, you order a product that promises this and that, and then you order it and you test it yourself, and if that works for you, fine. If it doesn't, why would I attack it? It is up to you and your responsibility what works for you or what doesn't work for you. And I wish for people that have that conflict, that followed people, like if you following followers, you most likely end up not really finding actually what you're looking for. I never followed a leader. I never went to therapy. I never had to take pills. Bless those who need medication. Always consult a doctor. I'm not a physician. I'm just saying, in my opinion, it's like I learned through my mother, who is my mentor. You can say my Shaolin Abbot mastermind is my mother, that I would consult with. I would come to a conclusion where I'm like, Mom, I don't understand the world anymore. This is just getting crazy. Then my mom would be like, back to basics. I will cook some soup and we eat and we sit and we go back to basics. All of this craziness out there, we have to be careful to not get entangled in that. I've heard people talking about quantum physics. You're not a physicist. You don't know anything about quantum physics. So there's nothing for you to regurgitate. I'm not seeing these regurgitators that would read articles and regurgitate the article. That's not, you haven't written that. You're not the genius. You're regurgitating something that's based on what? You haven't seen a camera, nor have you observed a molecule, nor the experiments that people have done, where every observer has a different outcome of the observation, because every individual, dualism in division, has a different field of perception. If I tell a 5-year-old boy, imagine a ball, then the boy would probably say, the ball has this size and it's color red. Well, that's his perception. Who am I to take that from him? I asked another boy, how do you imagine a ball? And he would say, well, mine is like very tiny and it's blue. Well, that is his magic. That is his perception. And we leave it at the basics and we leave it with them. Who are we to criticize? You can't imagine a blue ball. You can't imagine a red ball. Doesn't make sense. Does that work for you? Yes, good. Are you a better person? Good. Is your business successful? Yes. Do you have a big network and people see that you make sense? Such as, I don't know, Ralph Smart or Tony Robbins, these people out there that make sense to people and people can change their lives. Suicide rate drops, which should never be an option, and they get better, and we are no doctors by title or degrees of Harvard and Yale, and we can be professors and we can make mistakes. We didn't know that Einstein studied the Bhagavad Gita, Hindu tablets, and Madame Blavatsky in order to look into the aspect of can molecules as such as atoms be split. You think that formula E equals mc squared comes from nowhere? He took notes. He studied Vedic papers. We did all of this before. And I think critics need to stop belittling the human race by that we're so basic and when we die the party is over. It's you belittling yourself. And anything that Zen Buddhism teaches, that anything that you are in conflict is the conflict that you are having within yourself, that you're in conflict with, meaning a belief system that you have not integrated. I'm not in conflict with any belief system, but I can say I don't carry a gun. I can say I don't paint my house black. I can say I don't believe in racism because we all bleed red. I can say we can unify, and it doesn't require religio to rely on something that is promised after death, such as what religion's been doing. Also the manipulation in holy books that teach you free will, but yet you have 10 commandments. What's it going to be? Free will or 10 commandments? I break it down to common sense. Does that make sense to you? and nothing needs to be dismantled or taken apart. If your neighbor knows how to fix his car and he has tips and you see that his car works, I humbly sit back down and I shut up because I learn. When I studied Wing Chun for 25 years, and partially with my man Maurice at the Dragon Academy in New York, he was my Sifu. You do not question the Sifu. He has moves and systems that work. And when I started, my ego was like, yeah, I'm quicker than you, I can challenge you. And when I tried to challenge him, I failed naturally because I wasn't equipped with the path of knowledge, meaning carry my buckets of water. And trust me, I carried my buckets of water where other people would fail and fall apart, where I was working for a company where they had me file screw heads a millimeter smaller because they bought the wrong screw heads to mount. I also worked in the construction field because as a tech, you also had to know about construction when wires had to be put up and the plugs in the wall and the wiring and knowing the ground, the hot wire and minus, plus, minus, and ground, and how to wire the grounds together, not to make a mistake, know your measurements, know the capacitance and the series of I had to draw up circuitry boards. That was also my test to prove that, before the concrete was put over the wall and stuff was covered up, that my circuitry and my wiring and my cables were actually correct. If not, I had to go back and I had to do it all over. I was graded by that. I was paid by that and for that for 4 years. And sometimes people use headlines and run with the headline and think they have the acquired knowledge when they don't. Like I can say, if you need me to build an ionizer, I can do that. If people will say, if you want me to build from scratch an AC, I can do that. I know how the coolant systems work. I know how the wiring, the fusing, the networks, the plug-in, all of these components can put together. So I learned very much so in Germany, assembly. Assembly also, I'd say that to top the education went even higher. My assembly began with freaking Lego blocks, learning how to build things and construct. And my mother watched me building space stations. I mean, from a young age, I was with the space. That's me. I'm guilty. I'm a Trekkie. I'm guilty. If that's bad, if you like Friends or Cheers, hey, more power to you. I like Star Trek. I like Kirk. I like Spock. I like hip hop. I like reggae. I like house music. We all have different tastes. Some like country. Music is music. There's only 2 types of music. Good music and bad music. It's your choice. It's up to you. And to simplify that is, can we make peace with one another? Can we get along? I use the sandbox analogy, which I so often use, is a kid, and I had experienced that, and this is not, I can't get over my trauma or get over it, I'm past it, but I just look at it. As a kid, he builds a sand castle. While all the other kids superficially playing with one another and they build their little castles, he takes his time, he sits, he observes, he watches the other kids, and he builds this ginormous castle. It takes a long time. And they laugh and they say, you don't know what you're doing. And then he's finished and everybody's amazed of what he has built. But there's this one dude. And this is for all those who are going through this. These bullies that can't leave people alone, can't leave people in peace. I think they have possessed or they have serious problems. They're obsessed with you. They wake up in the morning, this thought form enters their head, and they're convinced that thought form, that they have to act that out to find satisfaction. That means whatever entity or whatever you're creating in your mind owns you. You're not in control. So the bully comes over, steps on the castle, sand castle, and destroys it and says, see, you ain't shit, and laughs and finds it funny. See, that proves my point. And I say we as a people and as a community have to stick together and see that that doesn't prove anything, that you are being destructive, or being critical. An architect, let's say if an architect would assist with building the pyramids, he would say, how can I assist to make the angle smoother and make the positioning more correct? And then you would serve. And your business and your greatness and your success is on an Zen Buddhism, Buddhism itself, and ancient teachings all combined is, what is your service? How can you serve without having an opinion? And what you do is great. That's basics before any magic. Like if the plumber comes to your house, the plumber doesn't have an opinion. He has his life that he goes through. You have a leak in your house. What does the plumber do? And he's probably more Zen than you'll ever be. He fixes your pipe. Your plumbing works forever, never leaks. It's like your house is blessed, and I think there's something to it. And he did his job. And we need to go back to that. The shoemaker, my great-great-great-grandfather was a shoemaker. And the shoes were not returned because his production was good. And that's at the end of the day what I'm looking at. What product are you delivering? On what level are you working on? Are you a theoretical wizard, as in life? Or are you a practical wizard? Do you take your time to study? And not a few books, and not the most famous or the bestsellers. Like, I look for books that nobody looks for, where you won't find any titles. There's a book called The 7 Dimensions of Hermetics. Paperback, I think 500 issues were printed. I would be amazed if you would even find that on eBay under $300. Back then I bought that for $10. Changed my life. Didn't need a guru to follow that. I'm just looking at, okay, what am I applying here? What am I imagining? And, in the Gita, respectfully, the older Shakti embodiment beings that had the siddhis and had the skill, they would tell you that your body, there's energy patterns described to your body. An MRI can measure the fluctuation of the Gaussian fields in your brain. Hence, we measure what? Brain states. It's not magic, it's science. So when people get lost in the mythological make-believe and make it rain tomorrow, that's not quite how it works. But we can make it rain when we can change the alchemical process in the clouds. So it's nothing magical. And it's also nothing new. It's like, we're not teaching anything new. We're bringing it actually back. I was taught by the Bavarian Institute of Bio-resonant Research, and they have won prizes in Germany. Germany is much stricter, the FDA and science division, to check your experiments and the outcome of what you produce, way stricter than the US. Like in the US, you can sell anything. In Germany, you cannot. If you cannot prove quantifiable evidence of what you're doing actually works in front of a team that will actually evaluate that it works according to what you say, then your backing is equivalent to what they see, and then you may release that, which can take years, which also makes it tough to be an innovator. But the thing is, when somebody has physical evidence of what they're doing and it takes place and it can be sensed, there's no argument. Any argument has left the building. There's nothing going on but the truth. The truth shall set you free. Yes, we use a lot of metaphors as in psychic and some say, well, be psychologically correct and use the word intuition. So people are not so upset by, psychic or crystal ball. Let's take the crystal ball away. Yeah, I've seen, what's it called? Paranormal Witness, eyewitness report of a chief detective, 20 years on a force, and another police officers, 22 years on a force, that had a case that they have never experienced in their life. And let's say I'm naive and I'm gullible, I just leave myself open to that. And they had a case where a girl was abducted and murdered. And they had actually no clue. They were clueless. And because through friendship relation, the cop had a friend that he would call an intuitive, not even a psychic. And she didn't even want to be called that or labeled it. And I find these cases very interesting, and that interests me. If that interests you and that sparks your interest, well, you may expand. If not, you may expand wherever you will. That's your freedom. Anyway, that lady saw on the news the report about the missing person, and they said she was murdered, and she had this flash in her mind where she see she sees the word raped, 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 raped all over. So that is not common sense or human regular consciousness. She's tapping into the grid. She's tapping into the trauma that was somewhere, call it the morphogenetic field. And people say, yeah, that hasn't been proven. The same thing with Einstein was laughed at when he said there are gravitational waves that have an influence on molecules, and that somewhat has to do with the universe and the construct of the planes of existence. And he was laughed at. That doesn't exist. You're just making this up. This is a theoretical construct. I find it interesting that last year, mind you, with a laser system, by coincidence, we found gravitational waves. So there's nothing to be debunked when we have an intuition where we are going. Naturally, as humans, we're not that dumb. We have an idea where things are going. We'll find amazing things. So I say leave yourself open to that scientifically stuff can be found. We know such thing as ghosts and apparitions can be measured with NASA has these cameras that can go into 15 spectrums up the UV spectrum, and you see stuff hovering around night and day. Like our atmosphere is full of plasmic things that seem to move intelligently. Even when you aim something at it, it would just move away, just like plankton underwater. It's there. Just because you can't see it right now doesn't mean it's not there. That's part of the plasmic invisible world. That's like, let's say, layer 11 in the UV spectrum. They do that to look further out. Cosmology does that, and astronomers do that to see if they find stars that have collapsed upon each other, and they want to see if they attract light, because you can't. The star is invisible to the human eye. The only way to determine that the star is there is to see the gravitational field of light around it, which science has proven that it is so. Which I find amazing. On a side note, is where people still want to argue that, well, I think there's nothing to argue, is that the Dogon have a ritual for 6,000 years where they have this big elliptic symbol in their cave, and they have an X to the side of it. And in the 60s and in the 70s, scientists went down there to study these folk. Like, where do you have this cosmology from? Which is not the only folk with cosmology. The Mayan calendar is absolutely astrological knowledge that's based down on a hexadecimal code and a bitmap that a computer can actually turn into an algorithm such as the I Ching, and it can plot out binary numbers and codes that all line up with all the numbers in the calendar. Like there's no mistake, as if a computer brain had designed that. Ask yourself where this comes from. You think that the so-called primitive races just pull binary bit codes out of their behinds, and then there it is, and by coincidence all the stars line up and everything is perfect because they were just so perfect. They put, same with the pyramid, you put over 1 million tons of rocks on a centrifugal center point on the earth, which has been measured, because sand would give way and that pyramid would sink. They put it on a plateau where it's actually a rock formation because they knew about it without ground penetrating radar. We just have now found that out. So never ever question the so-called primitive races that know stuff that we find out 50 or 60 years later that it is so. One thing with the Dogons I wanted to mention, which is like kind of my favorite topic. They asked the Hogon priest, which is the high priest of the Dogon, which nobody can touch. I mean, I don't know if they still practice that, but it was so, if somebody would dilute them with their non-belief and would touch the Hogon priest, the dude had to be killed. It's pretty radical because he was diluted. The knowledge wouldn't be transmitted pure. He lived and died in the temple, and nobody was allowed to touch that guy or give any opinion that would dilute what has to be translated for the races to navigate through space and time, so the species wouldn't go and lose their identity. So they asked the high priest, that X, what is that? And they would say, that's the star such and such, Onunualu or whatever. Like I probably have the name wrong. You have to study those things before you can make any claims, and read tons and tons of books before you can even begin to get into the topic. Like some people want to talk, and I say, get a library card, come back in 5 years. I might listen to you if you have something of a pattern that would match and make sense, where I can say, okay, now you're making sense. I can agree on what you're saying, what you're sharing. So then they asked the Hogon priest, so what's that star? And he says, well, our ancestors come from that. It gives me the goosebumps, so I have a reaction to it. people can say because you want to react to it or you want that. I think there's truth to it. What do you want to call it? Ancient technology, and what our ancestors, try to preserve and rock, so we remember where we come from. So later on we can find our way home, which only makes sense. So he would say, what you call Sirius, there is a second Sirius, but you can't see that with your human eye. And then the scientists, you just have to really simplify your mind and put two and two together. Respect intelligence, and it requires intelligence to acknowledge such, I say. And the Dogon priest would say, well, this was a giant star once, and it collapsed upon itself. Like a Dogon priest, we call them primitive races, no acquired astrological knowledge, but about that system. And he said it was a very, very big sun, and it fell upon itself. And he would hand gesture this. Okay, so an implosion, when a planet collapses upon itself, would kind of look like this. And then they said, well, so describe your planet, which NASA later on called Sirius B. And he said it was as big as a giant sun. And when it collapsed, it turned into a grain of sand, like a little seed. And he, in his primitive language, which I would say simple language, would explain this seed was the big sun now that collapsed, but it is very, very tight, and it has the intensity of thousands of suns. In another poem, he would say, imagine this star was as big as 10 sacks of rice. Now it's as big as 1 grain of rice, but is still as heavy as 10 sacks of rice. That's what the Dogon priest says. Now you have to be not smart to not understand it's a planet that collapsed upon itself. It has the density of a bigger sun, but is this size. It's a dwarf of some kind. That means it can have the density of, 100 times the Earth, but it's, it's the size of a needle. Well, that can be explained now. In the 60s, the people were still laughing at the Dogon that this all happened by coincidence. NASA in the 60s, and it's dated, according to that research in Africa, in Mali, that's above Nigeria. The map, go to the continent Africa and look at that. I suggest also look at the Dogon mystery. Very, very interesting. They found Sirius B, and it was invisible, as the Dogon priest said, to the human eye. And how did NASA find that? And that's why I learned astrological, okay, wow, this is how you find invisible stars. They learned that actually because of this old traditional deliverance of the priest, that they found this big elliptic wobble that Sirius A would make. And that's what the Dogon said, that's what the first star is. And the second star was placed to this side. So NASA had that cave painting, and they had their own observation through the telescope, and they would see when Sirius A would traverse to roughly where the X is, it would wobble a little bit and then would come back, and a little wobble and would come back. I find this amazing. That's why people leave yourself open to really understand what's going on, how fantastic you are. And you don't need to follow a cult to see that. You just open your eyes, open your ears, open your heart, and you'll prosper. So they honed in on where the wobble is, and they realized that the light would encircle something that is invisible. So they did their math and their calculation, which is what Western civilization needs. We can't feel, we need, the left hemisphere. At some point, it's good to document. It shouldn't lead, though. And they realized there is a Sirius B according to the gravitational field that we have calculated that it is there. How do these Dogon priests that sit in the desert of Africa know about this? And they say it's a 6,000-year-old practice. And they say from the normals, which came from the sky, which are ancestors in human form, and they're not from this earth. We'll go to the Bible. And God looks upon the inhabitants of earth. It's always an intelligence that is described that looks upon the planet. And many, 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 many translations more. I mean, I'm very proud of Erich von Däniken, 23 languages, over almost 100 million books sold worldwide. People were beginning to make sense, and I'm very proud of you. And the story shall continue that way. And over 100 Hollywood productions that all lean on Erich von Däniken's findings and comparisons of patterns where there must be an outside influence that brought these things to us in order for us to engage in things in mathematics and things that just, the stuff doesn't just come out of nowhere. You just don't wake up and all of a sudden you know how to make geometry, like Pythagoras, to Latin Pythagoras, had a brother who was the one with the science, and he learned from that brother, which was an orphan they found under a tree. Dude was looking into the sun, always kept mumbling, and gestures and, a broken language and partially Latin that he's not from this planet. Why would a child create that, especially in that time? And he would, sinus, cosinus, the tangents, and all of these equations of a square, a rectangle, that we base our formula on that guy who learned from his half-brother that his family found under a tree. It's in books, it's documented in scriptures that are thousands of years old, that can't be debunked or proven wrong because they are in writing, just like the cuneiform that talks about things that you can't talk away. And for those who waited for the 2012 era, I have to say, just don't feel sorry for yourself. Don't feel bad. The Hopis, the Aborigines, the Inuit, and many more say when the event will take place, it'll be within a very short amount of time for all of us to realize that it's actually more out there than we believed. And leave yourself open for that. Don't be misled by people that promise that it never comes. Like I said, be careful with prophecies. We shouldn't make prophecies. But look at systems that work. If somebody can generate and build an electromagnetic motor that can, make or produce watts that can actually, sustain a household, then we would buy that. I put that up once and I said, I'm willing to pay $1,000 if somebody can just make a tiny thing that makes 10 volts. And I'm still waiting for the day that somebody shows that. That makes our job hard because so many people claim for fame, and then when the rubber meets the road, they can't prove that the vehicle works. But understand this, what we have to go through, Tesla had to go through this. And I'm not comparing myself to these big entities, but everybody does their part. We're all pieces of a puzzle. Is when the Wright brothers said, we're going to build a plane that's heavier than air, but it will fly. They were laughed at. The critics were like, you're all ridiculous. Even before that, when a guy said, I will build a steam engine that would not, first steam engine ran on water, hot water, and a piston would run. And he said, I will create something with alcohol and a combustion system. I can see it in my mind. First of all, that's powerful how somebody can see that in their mind. And he said, I will create something which later on led to a motor that was run on fossil fuels, that would run for a longer time and distance, and he was laughed at. He said, that is impossible. That is unimaginable. How would that even work? It would explode. Again, the first motors they built, guess what? They exploded. People died. Stuff went wrong. Failure was the norm. Success is the exception. It's always the same rule. And it doesn't require religion or whatever name you pin on it. Just go back to basics. If you can build a catapult, which is what Leonardo da Vinci scribbled in his book, and later on it was built and it worked. How did this guy channel that? A Freemason. Look at the Da Vinci book, The True Magician. Many don't even know that book. Look at the schematics that he painted of engines that haven't even built yet that are in there. The French people were the first ones to build a dam that would level the waterways in a river so ships can cross when the riverbed would drop, according to the schematics of Da Vinci. It's if you have a proof of concept, a pramana, proof of knowledge, and the application works, all the bickering and bitching and criticizing stops. And that's where I'm at. Does it work? Does your pill do what it does? Does your oil does what it do? I tested DMSO, which I read an article the pharma tried to prevent being released I said, okay, I'm naive here. I have severe neck pain and a migraine. And they said, you put it over your muscles. I see this lady that she had whiplash from an accident. She put that ointment on for 21 days. That lady had to sleep with weights on her head because she was in so much pain. She's pain-free, can move her head. And I was like, feels like there's some truth to it. So I spent $15 and ordered that. And I had some pain here. I put it on and it burned like magnesium. It was kind of like tough DMSO, do your own studies. And my pain left. Well, if that's placebo, then I like it. And make no mistake, there's a difference between the real thing and placebo. Placebo does not make your engine run faster. Placebo does not make your plants grow bigger. Placebo is as if you believe it. And if people say what can be said is suggested, I can't suggest to a seed of mung bean sprouts to grow 3 times bigger. That's impossible. What I do, use photonic sand that has been atomically agitated in a lab and has to be produced, which is an expensive process. Yes, because not everybody in the world does that. And then you add that with agricultural chalk, not fertilizer, and you put it in your soil. And your sprouts grow this big, nice. Your strawberries grow this big. Your potatoes grow bigger, and if you just pour sand in your fridge, and your potatoes last longer. Where does that come from? Bio-resonance. You can do it yourself. Take a potato, put it in a wooden encasement, and put it in the soil. It'll last 6 months. Put it in your kitchen, it'll last 2 weeks, it'll shrivel and it'll turn foul. What does that tell you? When you take the bioresonance away from product, it'll rot. The Egyptians, or the forefathers of the Egyptians, found out how that works, called bioresonant energy. Guacamole, you can do that at home. Take guacamole, make the guac, and set it on a table and then wait, I don't know, a couple of hours and see how it turns brown. Why is that? Bioresonant field is missing. That can be measured with a biophotonic emission camera. You don't need to be a super scientific mind to know how that works. Now, from the avocado, take the seed and leave the seed in the guacamole, which is an old recipe from cooks. It's an old trick. And the guacamole does not begin to rot that fast. Why? Because the biological and biovital information that the seed transmits to the fruit is still sending. Because it's in you, and you can do this at home. Do one with and one without, and see how the other one rots faster. It's not magic, it is science, and that's where I'm at, and that's where we actually can beat also the non-believers. Come with physical evidence, physical residue, things that can be felt. Because I believe a skeptic only doesn't have the experience. That's why he's skeptic. Be skeptical. Don't believe a word. Test it for yourself. Find out for yourself what works for you. And if you in your mind see with discernment, that works for me, onwards you go and you progress. The others that have no knowledge and criticize everything will be forgotten over time. They have no endurance. They'll get old. They probably don't have a day job. My job is actually from 9 to 10. I have to think about ideas that I see, concepts and dots that I want to put together and make sense. So people say, that makes sense to me, and that was actually enlightening. And enlightenment means, I got this from a professional Zen monk, is to not do. Don't say anything. Don't criticize. No conflict, be at peace. Don't feel the need to come in. You're not Batman, you're not Superman, you're not needed, really. You are needed with you and your peace. And when you make peace, you're not so important anymore. And you don't have to say anything because things work. So I look at the gardener and I look at your garden, and a few weeds grow. Your apple trees are happy. Your fruits are happy, your baskets are full, people are happy, and you have philosophies with and what you bring forth is you will know who's who by the fruits of their labor. And truth, never forget that, can never be corrupted. It'll always be what it is. And I have a high work ethic when I put my stuff down. And I sit down. And I did the Kung Fu miles, the stairs with 144,000 stairs and the buckets of water for years and years. I carried that. I ate bread and had water and rice for weeks because I had no money to buy food, to think about life's plan and how can I serve this planet with exchange, change somebody's life. And my question is to everybody out there, can you make somebody happy? It's easy to make people angry and upset people and threaten people and bully people. I've seen that in school, but can we enrich each other? Nityananda said that, and I like that. He said, yeah, we are all individuals out here, but actually we're here to enrich each other. If you're an amoebic system that's made out of 5 trillion cells that all enrich each other, that makes you human, that makes you man. And there's so much more. Can you imagine if your DNA is roughly, and I'm conservatively speaking, is 2.6 billion years old? What knowledge have your ancestors acquired to survive and go this far from the harsh times to now, where you can, at the click of a button, can have service delivered to your doorstep? That's the level of manifestation that we have. Everything is being handed to us. We're privileged in this country. We have everything. Now, can we do this right? So, past 2012, evolution is an ongoing process. Those who go negative go extinct over time. If you're not being kind and evolving and connecting and bringing communities together in healing, you'll go extinct over time. And that story won't be repeated. That's for sure. So, as you can see, as Hollywood is selling top seller in movies is metaphysical movies and superheroes. Such series such as The Magicians or Travelers, where people download consciousness through space and time. All of these concepts are being released right now because that information is being released to us, so we are prepared for the possibility to go once more where we have been before. That's why we bring forth these things, such as Star Trek or Star Wars. If that is just an imagination, such a fantasy, then you'd have to say, wow, are we creative? And if all of that means nothing, it would be very sad. According to the Drake equation, it is impossible to not have intelligent life, such as we are in the universe. And now we're finding neighboring Earths, terra planets that can actually, where we can actually be there. We can live there. We can have neighbors. It's like we can talk about Italians, and since you've never visited Italy, you can't say Italians don't exist. That's what people say about the Arcturians or Syrians or Pleiadians. We have all of these dominant systems that are translated from ancient times. NASA has not found anything new. I found a city near Sharm el-Sheikh in Egypt that I visited that's called Aldebaran. You heard about Aldebaran in Star Wars. You think that these star systems are just Hollywood and movie scripts? No, these people look at what's there. Aldebaran, reflects actually the stars. There is in Spain a church called Santiago de Compostela, which represents the constellation of the Seven Sisters, the Pleiades. All of this is well thought of and not by coincidence. Everything that will take place will take place. So what can be avoided will be, like quantum physics. Extremes will meet, and they, like two particles meet, and they will change the directive, and the telemetry will become something else, and that will create something that we are witnessing. So the cities that we have built now are the dreams of the architects hundreds of years ago, and we're living in their dream. And who's to say, in 1,000 years, we might live in elliptic buildings, oval halls, round towers, chameleon paint that would change the color according to the frequency of the weather pattern. We can build it. It's all real. It's all here, and we are creating it. So as Hollywood right now delivers all these metaphysical movies, know this, don't be misled that by the evil villain using his magic and getting away, it's not okay to misuse, first off. to develop magic looks much different as a technological, alchemical knowledge embodiment. Doesn't come with flares and pixels and CGIs and animation and green screens and cameras. We're doing our best with the technology to compensate for what is not there yet, but it doesn't mean it won't be of existence. Radios didn't exist before, now they exist. Flat screens didn't exist before. When I worked as a TV VCR technician, mind you, they laughed at me when I said, one day somebody will come and he will make a screen like in the science fiction, and the screen will be the TV. Now, flat screen is common. That's nothing new, And in a minute, who knows, the future iPhone will be just a glass pad that will have nanoparticles inside. You can look through the glass pad, and when you touch it, the hologram will appear in it and you'll use it. So iPhone is almost there. It's a glass pad, but it's still an encasement because the circuitry is still visible. They showed computer chips from Silicon Valley that are see-through and that are light sensitive and solar powered. And circuitry where the AI can switch and change and rearrange its own circuitry. Like you want an upgrade, you hold your phone against another transponder, and the stuff will change. Intelligent paper that will respond. The pixels in the paper will respond to your pen, so ink won't no longer be needed. All of these fantastic things have been here before. Watch the movie John Carter. That science fiction was written over 100 years ago. Why do these people know these things? You come to your own conclusion. I believe we have already been there. I think we have already been an advanced species. We're on repeat and we're catching up. And when we agree with that we have been there, guess what? We're ready to make contact with ourselves. So for whatever resists there, don't be so resistant to what's coming. For the day and the hour is not foretold. It's for you to witness. So I'm not making any predictions or prophecies. It happens when it happens. When the first guy, builds a submarine that can go deeper than any submarine has gone before, it'll be shown. When we find something for all to see, it'll be known. Before that, we leave our minds open for and what and how it can take place in peace. So let the inventor build. Let him try, let him fail. But look at the guy who's trapped in theory. Look at the guy who wrote 54 books, and look at the critic who has 2 books. No following, no sales, but he criticizes the guy that's successful. Come to your own conclusion. Who would you follow? Who makes more sense? Well, I go to the mechanic that knows how to fix my car. I'm not going to the mechanic that has fixed 2 cars in 19 years and keeps talking about how to better fix cars, because that's theoretical concepts. Also, science has proven you're stuck in your theta brainwave. That is all theoretical. That is the length dimension from the Hindu papers. It's very descriptive. And you can look very powerful. You'll be able to describe a lot of things. But breadth dimension, meaning, can you build it? Can you bring it to life? Can you make it 3D? And the depth dimension is making it real. So you have length, depth, and breadth to correct that. Length, description, depth, to bring it into form, like CAD design, and you print something and you bring it here. And breadth is, can you turn on your, radio, your walkie-talkie, or your phone? Does it come on? Does it do what they say it does? And that is the mastership of 3 planes. There are more planes. I'm doing another video on how to understand how to master 5 planes. The 5th plane is actually that you bring something to life that everybody says that is impossible, and you turn it on and it works. That means a 5th dimensional meaning, making the impossible possible. So it seems. So you're much more powerful than you are. You're much more creative than you are. You are your own leader. You need no guru. You need no following. You need to find essentially those who make sense. Create an eclectic collection of that which you need in your life. Put it together and build your life. And that choice, for however it may be, rests with you. I see you, as usual, on the flip side. Peace.